to the land of dreamweavers! I've always had this certain reverence for Mindanao. I've always wanted to go and experience the culture firsthand because it's somewhere I'd never been before. And to see that culture and that tradition has been passed down and is being kept to this day in such good condition, it makes you feel really hopeful. I really admire how the people, they're very connected to nature. They draw all their inspiration, their spirituality from nature, and it's reflected in their work, like in weaving tinalak. The fabric. Each color represents something. All the materials are sourced from the plants, from the vegetation, from the earth, and the inspiration for their arts. It was really insightful to see how much reverence they had for their craft.
Tinalak is actually a fabric that can only be found in Mindanao. The traditional way of weaving is really something that is amazing. I get to understand how they do it, why they do it, and the manner of creating the patterns. Being able to immerse yourself in such culture is something that I'm really proud of. It's really a great honor to be able to do the books that will represent the Mindanao area, the Mindanao region, to be part of the country of the greatest national costume.
They're deeply connected. They have this deep respect. And I think that's really admirable, and that's something that we could really share to the generations today, because we really need more admiration and respect for our earth and how we look after it and how we are connected as people to it. This one evening we were invited to a Tiboli house, and we were treated to a native meal and of their local delicacies. They even performed for us using their native instruments. It's the first time that I ever experienced anything like that. It was amazing to see them all together.
Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Thank you so much for welcoming us into your home and also to experience your beautiful culture. Introduced me to the beautiful textiles of your culture, and I just fell in love. Kasi ang ganda po. So ang ganda, and I feel like the international stage should be able to see it and know that here in the Philippines, this is one of our pride and joys. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be with you all and to learn about the origin of it, because I wanted to understand first where it came from before bringing it to the universe stage. So thank you so much po. I will definitely take pride in showcasing your culture to the international stage.
I think people need to know about what it means to them, how they put together their crafts, how it's been carried down their generation to generation. And I think even when I experienced that, that's what made me fall in love with what they do, their craftsmanship, their art, their handiwork, their products that they make. I fell in love with it because of the history of it and what it means to them and the reverence and respect that they have for their craft. So I think, if people were to realize that, it would really add value to that product, and people would be proud to own a product from Mindanao.
Good Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our afternoon session of our second webinar, international webinar for people and mountains. Mountains are the world's water towers, providing 60 to 80% of all fresh water resources for our planet. At least half of the world's population depends on mountain ecosystem services to survive. Not only water, but also food and clean energy. However, all available records indicate that glaciers in mountain ranges across the world are retreating and disappearing due to climate change. At least 600 glaciers have disappeared completely over the past decades, affecting water supplies relied on by billions downstream. For example, in Pakistan, water originating from the Hindu Kush Himalayas provide 80% of irrigation for the Indus Basin, where food is grown for 180 million people. Major cities such as Rio de Janeiro, New York, Nairobi, and Tokyo rely almost exclusively on fresh water from mountains. On the other hand, mountain attracts around 20% of global tourism, hosts nearly one quarter of all terrestrial biodiversity, and are home to many of the foods that come to our table, such as rice, potatoes, tomatoes, and barley. Yet, they are home to some of the poorest and hungriest people in the world. In Southeast Asia, living far away from centers of power and decision making, mountain peoples, especially in developing countries, are often marginalized in political, social, and economic terms. Mountain communities lack access to basic infrastructure, education, credit, and markets, and all of these hinder their development. While men are often forced to migrate, the women who remain have heavier workloads to carry, in addition to taking care of the children and elderly. At a community level, cultural values and ancient traditions are lost. Mountains are under pressure, and so are mountain communities. The involvement of indigenous peoples and local communities is a prerequisite for sustainable mountain development in Bimpiaga region. The traditional knowledge and food production systems of indigenous and traditional mountain communities provide important lessons on how to adapt to climate change and are a reflection of value systems that place ecosystem preservation at the center of their belief system. For indigenous peoples and local communities living in these mountain areas, land, water, and forests are not simply natural resources to be used. As their ancestors before them, today's mountain dwellers understand that their well-being, their group identity, and their children's future depend on the careful stewardship of the environment. This intangible heritage also enriches the global community, providing inspirations and insights for realizing a more sustainable relationship between humankind and the environment. Welcome to the afternoon session of our second international webinar, People and Mountain Relations, brought to you by Sabah Government and Sabah Cultural Board as Malaysia's focal point for Bimpiaga Socio-Cultural Pillar. We are broadcasting live from KOTA KINABALU Sabah from Hilton Hotel and joined by a live studio audience. My name is Datu Patinggi Andrew Ambrose, or known as Atama, your host and moderator for this afternoon session. Our dialogue theme today is Cultural Tourism and Rural Community Empowerment of the year 2022 that brings cultural experts from Indonesia, Philippines, Brunei Darussalam, and Malaysia to discuss this very important theme. Our first speaker for this afternoon's International Bimpiaga session will share mountainous region conservation in the perspectives of sociological. Mountainous regions have complex issues emanating from its embedded and extrinsic characteristics, while the recent literatures put more emphasis on the commodified materialism of the mountainous regions, such as profit income, generation, facilities, transportation for visitors, and attractiveness. The ecocultural component of the mountain and its vicinity is understudied and left behind in the public discourse. This presentation will examine how these problems have been intertwined one another and what strategies we can offer to address the challenges and make it governable in the long run. Our first speaker this afternoon is Dr. Meridian Alam from Brunei Darussalam, the Associate Professor of Sociology from the Sociology and Anthropology Department, the Faculty of Arts and Social Science of University Brunei Darussalam. We're happy to have you join us today, Dr. Meridian. You have 30 minutes. The floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Hello, good morning, everyone.
You may proceed with the presentation, sir.
Hello, good morning, everyone. This is Meridian Alam. I'm from University of Brunei Darussalam, and I am teaching as a assistant professor of sociology and anthropology at the sociology and anthropology department. So, first of all, I would like to be so much thankful for the government of Sabah and also the Sabah Cultural Board for inviting me in this kind of a very prestigious international talk. And today, my talk will be focusing on the sociological concept, how we can maintain and also conserve the mountainous region in Southeast Asia, particularly. All right, next. All right. So as we know already that the South Asia region is a home to wide range of mountainous area which are rich in biodiversity, but also the cultural entities and also the practices as well. Most travelers are familiar with the regions of the beaches and towns, but few know about its stunning mountains. And due to its peculiar geographical locations, the region rests near geological plates that cause several seismic and also volcanic activities, which are also another challenge for the mountainous regions. The Myanmar, Thailand, and Peninsular Malaysia also part of the Alpine Himalaya orogenic band, or we call it as a Alpine belt. And the Philippines is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is also including Indonesia. According to the research, the Southeast Asian mountain tourism is underdeveloped compared to Europe. However, this is a room for us to develop the empowerment strategies for the local community members in the mountainous regions, and this is a cultural prospectus as well for the local community regions. In nutshell, across the world, the mountain tourism provides 15 to 20% of the worldwide tourism sector, or 70 to 90 billion dollars yearly. And UNESCO has recognized that there are 140 mountain areas in our biosphere reserve, according to United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organizations. So why the mountainous regions are so attractive? It is because, in nutshell, the mountainous regions is a host to a wide range tourism from Europe, from Asia, and across the world. It has a cool climate, clean air, verified topography, breathtaking natural scenery, local custom, and modest lifestyle outdoor sports that draw all of the travelers across the world to the highlands. And next, the next question is why culture is so important in this mountainous region preservations. So the culture can contribute to the identifications of the cultural identity. With the culture, we can characterize ourselves as a different entity compared to other countries. And then number two, by having a strong culture and distinctive socio and economic characteristic, we can introduce our social and cultural distinctions of our community as part or the components or of the global conservation issues. And also the culture is also becoming insights or at the basic as well as the foundations for our country's constitutions. All right, next. And this is the components of culture. All right. So here I identify the two types of component of cultures. Number one is the material. Number two is the non-material culture. All right. So the material culture As you can see here, there are consisting of different type of the components such as the technology, artwork, scripts, book, paper, architecture, mode of transportation, merchandise, and we do have a non-material culture such as the ideology, the way of knowing, the information disseminations, language, local expressions, behavior, and so on. In the system theory, all of non-material culture and also material culture are affected by the microsystem, exosystem, mesosystem, and the last one is the microsystem. In terms of the macro system, it is a political system in the country. Uh, for example, in the mountainous region in Malaysia, as mentioned by the previous speaker, that the election would be another challenge for the environmental sustainability. And then the common belief and also the structure of the society, as well as the wider cultural entity. For example, the mountainous regions are also circulated by other Malay culture in Malaysia. So this is part of the microsystem. In terms of the ecosystem, the government agencies are also playing very significant roles in defining the existence and also the sustainability of the mountainous regions culture. And that in the mesosystem here is much more smaller, consisting of the family experiences of the community members living in those mountainous regions, and even the schools and also other social institutions in the local area are also affecting and shaping the culture of the mountainous regions. In much more smaller system, we call it as a micro system. Yeah. So the places of the worship, for example, the religions and also the traditional belief system that are existing and also have been preserved by the local community also contribute to the sustainability of the culture in the mountainous region. And as the Mr. Albert Theo mentions that the management of this kind of culture in the mountainous region is also affecting all right. As mentioned by the Mr. Albert Theo, in his previous talk that in managing our mountainous region, there are actually four capitals that we have to identify and pay attention to. Number one is the technical capital. Number two, for example, the university and also local colleagues, college in Sabah are also innovating several service system and also the technology. Number two is the human capital, which is the capital, which is the community members who are working for this tourism industry, and also the cultural capitals and natural capital. Here in the mountainous region, it is very obvious that for example, the local species or the biodiversity and other things such as the water supply and the waste management are key important components in the loop in the sustainability loop of these mountainous regions. All right. Next, and then in this sustainability quadrants, I'm discussing about the four types of the governance system in the mountainous regions. Number one is that the regulations. When we talk about the mountainous regions tourism, the market mode of the economic system, the investments are also contributing to the increased the profits of between the governments, the community members, who are also the stakeholders of this system. Number two is that the well-being here is dependent on on the provisions of the health facilities on, and also the schools, the staff, and also the availability of the employment. So when we talk about the employment, then the local community members should be prioritized in this extent, right? And then the last but not the least in the economy and governance quadrant is the special transformations. As we have been recognizing so far that the urbanizations in Sabah, for example, and other parts of Malaysia have been uh, have been an issue, has been a contemporary issue in the latest centuries. And we have to pay attention to this new urban phenomena, which affect and influence and shapes the population changes, the migrations as well, and also the land use. The last but not least is the technology or the telecommunication providers. And this is to allow the smooth communications between the community members, the governments, the visitors, and also other stakeholders in the mountain tourism regions. When we talk about the history, so this is uh, another social and cultural component where the sustainability of the mountain region should be at the front part of the decision making in the government policy. Number one, we have to identify that the characteristic of the mountainous regions is also dependent on how the ancestors experience their mountainous regions. So we have to collect different untold stories, narrative from our elder uh, and our ancestors, our community leaders, our spiritual leaders about the biographies of our mountainous regions. And this can and all of these components should be introduced to the government, and that the government should take these components into account for the policy, for the tourism policy making processes. Other thing is the archive. The archive here is consisting of the documents, indigenous scripts, photos, artworks, poems, paintings, textbook, magazine, and newspapers. So the archives of the community members are so important for the government to create the holistic uh, tourism policy. So the policy itself is not only for generating the profits per se, but also to improve the life and sustain the community livelihood, not only in the 5 years but in the long term, right? So if it is the keyword is the long term, it means that the sustainability should be uh, at the priority. And other thing is that in this quadrant is the environmental component consisting of the ecosystem surface, hydrological system, climate, and also the geosphere. The ecosystem surface, first of all, we should pay attention on the conservations of the natural biodiversity such as plants, local animals, and we have to pay attention on the possible uh, biological infections from, for example, some some insect would be very dangerous for the animals in in the locations, and also how the native communities work and their indigenous knowledge should be incorporated in the ecosystem service to sustain, conserve, and preserve this biodiversity system. Number two is the hydrological system here, as mentioned by the previous speakers, that we have to uh, get more uh, identifications on the water supply, which is very significant for the sustainability of the mountainous regions. And the hydrological system, for example, the water, is the first thing that is needed by the community members, but also the visitors and the climate. For example, the weather events and also the adaptations to the climate change is also very important to uh, to uh, to be introduced to the community members, tourism, and also the government. All right. The next. All right. Next slide, please. Here, this is my framework on how we can contribute, how we can make the culture contributive in our community participations and also the future conservation. Number one is that the first phase of optimizing the community participation in the nature-based tourism or ecotourism should be connecting with the local community members because they are the key the the key stakeholder who are safeguarding our mountainous regions. And in terms of the first phase of the community participation, we need to ask them to tell us their real story, and they should be willing to share their cultural narrative with the tourists, with the governments, and their cultural expectations when the visitors come in. All right. So then the visitor will respect what's going on in their community right now. And then number two is that involving a sort of like workshop or the training, and then this uh, this project should be delivered by the local community members. And instead of equipping the visitors, the governments, and also the stakeholders about their cultural well-being, the local community with the essential knowledge on the biological and cultural system of the mountainous region will be able to make the ecotourism policy much stronger. And on the green box here, we can understand that the involving the sense of cooperative ownership to ensure that nature-based tourism successful. So here, the community members should be not only involved, but uh, they should be having sort of a sense of belonging, sense of ownership to the nature where they belong to. In the stage four is that the creation of the partnership itself between the local community members and also other stakeholders should be active, and then they should be involved in the monitoring of this stage. Why this is so essential? Because this is going to create a stronger bond and also harmonious relationship and sense of ownerships amongst the stakeholders, but also sense of appreciation for the stakeholder efforts in contributing to the tourism development. All right, everyone, that's all from me, and I'm looking forward to having your questions in the later sessions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much to our kawan, sahabat, Dr. Meridian Alam from Brunei Darussalam. Mountainous region conservation sociological perspectives. It's a wonderful presentation. It kind of allows us to segue into the other BIMPIAGA member country and practices on the ground. We've seen how the quadrant works, how the segmentation is done, and the various boxes that Dr. Meridian has expressed. Thank you once again, Dr. Meridian, our very kind assistant professor from the University of Brunei Darussalam. We will check back with you again in our question and answer session. Talking about question and answer, we now have 20 people watching us live. We want to ask all of you
Sure.
watching now to like and share this live feed, this live broadcast that's coming from Kota Kinabalu today. Okay, let's move on to our next presenter. Our second speaker for this afternoon session is a friend of mine. I met this young man in Kalimantan Barat West, Kalimantan, many years ago. His name is Michael Angelo Langgong Yambok. He is from the Philippines. He's here to speak about the impact of School of Living Traditions, or SLT, in heritage conservation in the Philippines. He says, revitalizing traditional culture has been central to the Traditional Heritage Conservation Program of the National Commission for Culture and Arts, NCCA, with the Schools of Living Traditions as the primary mechanism to implement that program. The School of Living Traditions is a flagship project of the NCCA, initiated by the Philippine Subcommission on Cultural Communities and Traditional Arts. So, Michelangelo Longgong Yambok is a Tiboli educator. He's a cultural worker, community and youth organizer, and a leading tourism advocate. We're happy to have you join us on video today, Michael. You have 30 minutes of your presentation. The floor is yours.
A Filipino people with a strong sense of nationhood and deep respect for cultural diversity. What is National Commission for Culture and the Arts? The National Commission for Culture and the Arts is the overall policy-making body, coordinating and grants-giving agency for the preservation, development, and promotion of Philippine arts and culture. The NCCA is mandated to conserve, promote the nation's historical and cultural heritage by encouraging and supporting the study, recognition, and preservation of endangered human cultural resources such as weavers, chanters, dancers, and craftsmen, as well as conservation of and development of such artistic, linguistic, and occupational skills with extinction. Number 2, preserve and integrate traditional culture and its various creative expression as a dynamic part of national cultural mainstream by helping set up and encourage, monitor, and subsidize companion system at the regional, provincial, and local levels intended to develop traditional cultures such as arts and craft centers, preferably in the community setting, apart from the usual museum, where exponents of living arts and craft can practice and teach their arts and enrich contemporary designs. For the last 5 years, the NCCA has endeavored to design strategies and develop programs to realize the following different development outcomes. First, culture as a pillar of sustainable development established. Second, creative and diversity of artistic expression advanced. Third, strong sense of nationhood and pride in being Filipino through culture and arts promoted. The National Commission for Culture and the Arts has 4 sub-commissions: the Sub-Commission on the Arts, the Sub-Commission on Cultural Communities and Traditional Arts, the Sub-Commission on Cultural Dissemination, and Sub-Commission on Cultural Heritage. The Sub-Commission on Cultural Communities and Traditional Arts has 2 major programs: the Gawad sa Manilika ng Bayan, or the National Living Treasures, and secondly, the School of Living Tradition. What is the School of Living Tradition? Conceptualized in 1995, the National Commission for Culture and Arts Programs on School of Living Tradition traces its roots to UNESCO's call to preserve the living tradition of the indigenous people and to the NCCA's mandate to encourage continuing balance develop of a pluralistic culture by the people to conserve and promote the nation's cultural heritage. These are community-managed centers of learning where culture masters and specialists transmit their knowledge and skills on a particular art, craft, and tradition to the young members of the community for their appreciation. The mode of teaching is usually non-formal oral, and primarily based on practical. The SLT aims to first identify aspects or components of traditional culture and arts considered to be important to a cultural community and transfer these aspects or components to the young through the masters of the community. Second, institutionalize learning centers for the perpetuation of indigenous people's culture and possibly integrate the program into a local cultural curriculum for wider participation and dissemination. And third, actively engage in flourishing of viable cultural enterprises and vibrant culture tourism projects that are grounded on local culture and which preserve and promote local knowledge. The models of sustenance for the School of Living Traditions. The culture bearers can become resource persons to ensure the transmission of indigenous knowledge and skills on a particular art form. The living community set as a learning center, non-formal civic center, formal school type, non-formal workshop or demonstration, and the living master as resident artist. The living community as a living center. First, we have a teacher, the living masters of a traditional art form in a selected ethno-linguistic community. Of course, we also have the students, young people from the same ethno-linguistic community, preferably out of school youths, young adults, 5 to 8 students at a time. And the mode of teaching is usually non-formal, oral with practical demonstration. We also have the site of learning centers, preferably the House of Living Masters or Kalang Banwa Community Social Center and Ritual House. In Tiboli community, we call it Gonobong. Relationship of learning center to the community, integrate with everyday life, does not disrupt the traditional rhythms and activities of the community. In 2008, there are at least 56 SLT all throughout the Philippines. So it added in 2014, we all have 106 SLTs all throughout the Philippines. As you can see, in the northern cultural communities, we have at least 10 or 15 community centers where the art forms are in weaving, basketry, textile and mats, pottery, house construction, accessories making, embroidery. We also have performing arts. This includes music, musical instruments, playing, and dances. And third is the oral tradition. This includes the chants, musical instruments making. And in the southern or central cultural communities, we have the following art forms. The weaving, this includes basketry and textile and mats, accessories making, embroidery, performing arts, music, musical instrument playing, and dances. We also have the oral tradition. This includes chants, musical instruments making, bamboo craft, and we also have healing rituals, knowledge on medicinal plants, hunting and gathering practices or language and traditional writing system. And in the southern cultural communities, we also have weaving, basketry or textile, mats, pottery, traditional clothing and accessories making, embroidery, performing arts, music, instrument playing, and dances. We also have oral tradition that include chants, music, instruments making, bamboo and wooden craft, and traditional cuisine and food preparation. The impacts of the School of Living Tradition in the community, the transfer of intangible cultural heritage, and also we also have the research and documentation and the publication of the different art forms. And this also includes the training of the young people who are learners of the SLT and the promotion and institutionalization of the School of Living Tradition. And the curriculum has been integrated because of the School of Living Tradition. And we also have community involvement and participation where the cultural masters are the masters of the community. We also includes the sustainability, and last, there's also an improvement in cultural tourism because people come to visit and experience the culture in the School of Living Tradition. The current state of the SLT in the Philippines, of course, there's a cultural literacy among SLT participants has improved. And SLT as a venue for community cooperation, sharing, and empowerment. And of course, there's a need for stronger commitment from the local government units and schools. We also need support, especially financial, and need for constant training in the community organizing for the program implementers. Need to establish the SLT as a stable source of income because the product that has been doing in the School of Living Tradition can be a good source of income and need for stronger marketing strategies and partners. That is the reason we are partnering with the different agencies of the Philippines. And we also have the following recommendation. First, capability building for the SLT implementers and the community masters. Also, we also have qualified SLT coordinators and preparation of a master plan and SLT toolkit or handbook, instructional materials, and SLT syllabus, in-depth and long-term documentation. And we also have monitoring and forging of interagency collaboration like the National Line Agency with the local government units. Institutionalizing economically viable centers where our products can be displayed. Establish of school-based SLTs. Developmental framework for community-based SLTs. Nursery for raw materials, equipment, higher skills training. We also have organizing SLT product fairs, recognition of SLT masters, and supportive LGU. So that's all for the School of Living Tradition. So before I end my topic or lecture, today I will be showing to you the School of Living video documentation for your perusal and appreciation. So thank you very much. I am Michael Angelo Yambuk at the Bali from Lake Cebu South, Cotabato, Mindanao, Philippines. Taybong, salamat.
Taybong salamat and thank you once again. Michael Angelo Langgong Ambok, and a very interesting and captivating presentation from the Philippines. There he is. So good to see you, Michael. How are you? Hope you're great. Can't wait to have a conversation with you together with those who are watching from wherever they are. But also here in Kota Kinabalu, we have live audience, and we look forward to bring their questions to the three of you presenters and our team colleagues and guests from Bimpiaga region. But we will have the question and answer session after one more presentation. But for those of you who just joined us on our live broadcast from Kota Kinabalu, this is the second international webinar on people and the mountain relation. We're broadcasting live from Hilton Hotel, and we have about, wow, about almost 30 people in our studio here at the hotel. Um, let's now move on to our third speaker for the afternoon session, who will be talking about tradition, tourism, and cultural empowerment lessons learned from the Tengger community of Indonesia. Tengger community who live in Mount Bromo has a unique culture and belief that affected to their daily life. The culture, which is the form of belief, norms, and sanctions, have become the foundation for them to achieve harmonization amidst the variety of culture that they have. Further, the social life of the Tengger is also related to tourism activities, whereas Bromo Mountain is one of the most attractive mountains that is visited by worldwide tourists. It influences their social life, not only in improving economy, but also introducing their culture. We have now with us Lita Rahmiati. She's a cultural specialist from Indonesia. We're happy to have you joining us today, Lita. You have 30 minutes for your presentation. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, speakers and participants. First of all, I would like to say thank you for inviting me as a delegate Indonesia. And today I will present about tourism, tradition, and cultural advancement as a lesson learned from the Tengger community in East Java. Before that, let me share screen first. Okay, there are four things that I will talk today. It's about Tengger community itself, their tradition, and how tourism and get its influence to the social and culture, and also the Indonesian policy itself. So what is the Tengger community? The Tengger community have been living around Bromo for hundreds of years and considers the mountain as a scarce landscape. Those people live in a traditional way and have retained their culture for decades. They have three meanings for the name. First, the name has the meaning of stand up. It represents the character of the local, which is sturdy and resilience. The second meaning is related to the mountain. It represents the place where those people live. And the third is a combination of two legendary people called Rara Anteng and Jaka Seger. They have their own annual ceremony that we usually called with Yatnya Kasodo. Usually, they conduct the ceremony in the temple located on the top of Bromo Mountain. This tradition has been passed down for a generation because they honor the mountain so much. In fact, they consider this as a holy place. These people will hike it during the full moon and carry some offering, which later they would give to Sang Hyang Widi. How is the social life? They are known for their high tolerance and hardworking and responsibility, especially in farming. The addictive character, because they open for these differences, especially when some foreigners or tourists come to their villages. As I mentioned today about the ceremony that carried out regularly by the Tengger people are full of philosophical value. These philosophical values are intensively contain ecological messages that are closely related to their attitude in interpreting and living life. The ceremony are the crystallization of their cosmic view of the universe, how the universe works, and all the elements in it are connected to one another. It reveals that the relationship between the Javanese and their nature is not in exploiting the nature so that they can get the maximum benefit, but rather in mutually nurturing in order to create harmony. The harmony of the relationship between the nature and human is very important. So when there is an inappropriate traditional practice, it will have an impact on the balance of nature, which will threaten human safety. So Mount Bromo is not only considered as a sacred broad mountain, but also a mountain that have bring blessing. So whatever that comes out from Mount Bromo, it is interpreted as a blessing. Mount Bromo is also positioned as an alarm for the social life of the local community. The eruption of Mount Bromo is also often interpreted as a warning from the Tengger ancestor that something wrong has happened in Tanah Hila-Hila or the Holy Land. Therefore, Tengger people will perform traditional rituals in order to restore the imbalance toward harmony. As I said before, there is a Kasada ceremony in the Mount Bromo. This Kasada itself, that held on the 40th day of the Kasada month from Javanese dating, it means as a gratitude ritual and a memorial to the sacrifice of Raden Kusuma. The ritual is a means to ask for salvation by giving offerings to God and the ancestors. It is started with prayer chants and scarred dance performance by the Tengger men and women on the sandy slope of Mount Bromo. Then promptly at the 12 in the morning, held the inauguration of the Saman and the blessing of the people of Mount Bromo. Tengger Saman's community is a leader in the field of religious people who usually lead the ritual. Before inaugurated, the Saman must pass the exam by recite mantras. And the ceremony itself, it's concluded by throwing the various offerings. Usually people will bring half of their cattle and their harvests, such as vegetables, fruits, and even money, and they throwing it away to the crater of the Mount Bromo. So the Tengger people in the management of natural resources is built on 4 main pillars, and the pillar included ritual system related to life cycle, land tenure and tenure system, forest management system, and water resources, and food crop agriculture system. Beside it, tourism is also one sector that has a very important role for economic growth in Indonesia, and for the people of Bromo, tourism and agriculture sectors are important aspects of economic life for them. Tourism itself gives some changes of the Tengger community social and culture. The life of Tengger tribe, the majority of whom works as farmers, including potato, broccoli, strawberry farmers, and others, while the obstacle for the Tengger people so far is the sale for the agricultural products, because their area is far from urban area. Therefore, the selling price of their agriculture is taken below the average market price by the trader. However, with the Mount Bromo tourism, the Tengger people can sell their agricultural product directly because many tourists have bought agricultural products from them, so that the Tengger people get the good impact from this tourism activity, and also income from agriculture management increase. Not only from the agricultural sector, but the community also earns income directly when involved or looking for income in Bromo tourism area. For example, like cheap rentals and also community houses that can be used as a tourist accommodation rentals, so that with activities tourism can increase their economic income. The existence of tourism activities, Tengger people who have the tradition of honoring their ancestors by holding the Kasada ceremony are not only attended by local community, but also attract tourists to visit the Tengger area. Therefore, Tengger people can indirectly show their culture and the lesson behind the traditional activities that make tourists become interested in knowing their culture. As the result of Mount Bromo tourism activity and external influences, it doesn't make the Tengger people leave their traditional activities. On the other hand, since the presence of tourism, many of the tourists have taken part in witnessing their traditional activities and give a good impact in motivating them for preservation their culture. It means with tourism, the culture becomes sustainable. Indonesia have the law of number 5, 2017 about the advancement of culture. In the Article 1, advancement culture of culture advancement of culture is the effort to improve cultural resilience and Indonesian cultural contribution to the development of world civilization through cultural protection, development, utilization, and capacity building and empowerment. There are, in the law of advancement of culture, position of the society is the owner and the driving force of the national culture. The societies who serve as an active cultural actor from the community level to the industrial level is the one who understands and is accustomed to most to the needs and challenges in advancing the cultural ecosystem. Therefore, very important to engage the society in the implementation of the law on advancement of culture. And how is the state? The state will mostly play as a role as a facilitator to accompany the community. The state will act as a regulator, which facilitates participation of and accommodates aspiration of all stakeholders. Based on this plan, the state, in collaboration with the community, will foster the cultural advancement at the local level all the way up to the national level. There are 10 objects of advancement of culture. So this 10 object, it includes tangible and intangible elements in oral tradition, manuscript, tradition adat istiadat, traditional games, traditional sport, traditional knowledge, traditional technology, art, language, and rights. And there is 4 strategic action in advancement of culture law. One is protection, development, utilization, and empowerment. As a conclusion, Mount Bromo tourism activities and external influences, it doesn't make the Tengger people leave their traditional activities. On the other hand, since the presence of tourism, many of the tourists have taken part in witnessing their traditional activities and give the good impact in motivating them for preservation their culture. The lesson learned from this case, the behavior of the Tengger people who are not overly dependent from the external people are appropriate in the primitive period of modern Indonesia. Therefore, the change from the agrarian society to industrial society doesn't need to be forced because it will only drive dependence. Tradition of harmony, understanding difference and pluralism, not depending on external, still carry out their tradition are the behavior that should be maintained. And the law of advancement of culture position the society as the owner and the driving force of the national culture. The state will mostly play as a role of facilitator to accompany the community. The government, together with the community, works to reach cultural advancement from the local to the national level. And that's it for my presentation for today. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Terima kasih Ibu Lita Rahmiati dari Indonesia. Such a very wonderful presentation from the three of you, our panelists from Brunei as well as from the Philippines. For those of you watching now live, I know it's in the afternoon and some of us are either somewhere else and some of us are still here. We have 60 likes and even loves coming from our viewers. And we have, a following of 12 live viewers. And do you remember this conversation that we're having can be visited again and again? Just come to our official Sabah Cultural Board page because this content is going to be there hopefully for a very, very long time. So we've come to the session where we have a conversation with our three esteemed panelists from our Bimpiaga region. Thank you for all your comments, and we've received so many of them, including some hackers here, or how do we put it, advertisers on our live Facebook, including Maki Apisenlo, our general manager, saying terbaik. We also have Mitch saying good morning. Actually, good afternoon, Mitch. Thank you for following us. So now is the time for you all to send your questions to our panelists so we can have a wonderful conversation and learn from each other and our member countries of BIMPIAGA. Jadi jangan malu-malu kirim soalan-soalan kamu kepada siaran kami di sini dan kami akan paparkan untuk kita bagi kepada kita punya panelists. Send in your Q&As, your questions, your views, your points over to our chat box here, and we will bring it up and designate it to our speaker. So we have a few coming in already. We have from Arion, but nanti we will bring that up. We will also have a moment of a conversation with our live studio audience. We still have in our audience our three esteemed distinguished speakers from the morning session. We have them on standby here, and I hope they can get in the conversation, especially because we have our colleagues from Philippines, Indonesia, and Brunei to talk about the way forward. All right, so we had a technical situation earlier on, and we found a way how to handle it from our studio here. So what we'll do is we will put up the questions for each of you, and I will turn off my microphone, and whoever gets the question, and if it's addressed to you, then you will turn on your microphone. And if it's not your question, you can turn off your microphone because we will have so many different sources of audio. So let's try to make this work. All right, so let's have the first question. It's from KC Pak Sabah, and this one is for Dr. Meridian. Let's have this. Okay, so the first question is for Dr. Meridian. Our viewer is asking about the temperature and the scales of
Yeah.
development of cultural tourism in Brunei Darussalam. Please,
Yeah.
you have the floor. I'll turn off my microphone now.
Yeah. All right. All right. So in Brunei Darussalam itself, the cultural tourism itself, it's not only involving the culture itself, but also here the government is also also introducing the engagement of the ecotourism. Like for example, you have if you are here, then you can visit the engagement between the culture and also environment. For example, while doing like jungle trekking in Ulu Temburong, in Temburong area, you can still enjoy the traditional dances and also enjoy the traditional cuisine. And number two, for example, right now, Brunei is also quite famous for its kampung air, you know. And then the kampung air right now, there are several homestay uh, industries there, and also the every night there are some local vendors who provide like having a dinner on the boat. And for example, in the homestay owners are also providing the visitors to enjoy the Bruneian cultures, because the owners are also one of the dancers and also have a strong networks with the Ministry of Tourism here. And in terms of for example, the dining on the boat, for example, the cultural practices are also incorporated while having the dinner. So, for example, the visitor can enjoy such things, and this kind of performance are on the land, but the visitors are on the boat, so they can enjoy it from afar. So, right now, the government has already expanded the growing number of the local tourism, and then the key highlights of this cultural tourism in Brunei is the incorporations of the nature. Yeah, for example, the jungle trekking in this kind of practices, the river cruising, and also cooking together a traditional cuisine in a jungle or in a forested area. So this is sort of like a new innovations here in Brunei that the government has been developing so far. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Terima kasih, Dr. Meridian Alam, taking the first question. Let's move on. I see a question from Ungok Gaming. Thank you, Ungok Gaming, for joining us and for your question. I believe this is, yes, it's confirmed. Let's bring it up. This is for Michael Yambok. Michael, I hope you're there. It's very interesting that Philippines come up with an idea for preserving cultural heritage through schools. The question is the system within the School of Living Traditions approachable towards the youngsters these days?
Yeah, good afternoon, Yukimal in Atabali language. The system of the SLT actually is for the young people, especially it is with the guidance of the cultural masters. And like for example, if there are culture that is missing, especially skills, so there's a need to put on the School of Living Tradition. So in the Philippines, as you can see earlier, that we have School of Living Tradition within 7,000 7,100 islands. And by this, the School of Living Tradition actually is a informal school where you can go any time of the day. There is a cultural master that is waiting for you there. Okay. And the School of Living Tradition can be also for adults, especially when you want to learn the skills. Like, for example, if you want to learn the traditional dance that you haven't learned for your life, you can just visit the SLT. Like, for example, if you want to learn mat weaving, then you can visit the SLT. Yeah, so instead of going around, just waste your time doing nothing, but just visit the SLT and the cultural master is waiting for you to teach you. And this SLT is free for those SLT that is not funded by the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. So there are also SLT or School of Living Tradition that is funded for 5 years. So therefore, the honorarium for our cultural master is available. The meals and the snacks for our learners is also available, and that is for 5 years. And there's also this module development, meaning because we use oral tradition, but this time everything has to be written because we don't know the fact that our cultural master will begin any time of the day. So so that it could be transferred to the young generation as well. So thank you so much and mabuhay.
Mabuhay. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Let's look at the questions coming in. Uh, we have incoming. Yes. Back to Dr. Meridian. What is the strongest point of community in Brunei Darussalam, especially in the rural area?
Yeah.
Doctor.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for these questions. I think this is quite fantastic questions. I really appreciate it. So in Brunei Darussalam, the strongest community components in the rural area is the sense of belongings to their nature, to their natural landscape, and also to their for example, the biodiversities. And then number two is the solidarity and also the sense of cohesiveness. So in the rural area here in Brunei, the community members are still preserving and conserving their traditions and also their in and also their religious practices and also the events. So if you are visiting Brunei this year, particularly during the New Year celebrations, you will be seeing a lot of local festivals and also some of the cultural events, religious practices, and there will be a lot of full of vibes, of course. And then even for foreigners, the religious practices, events, and also other cultural like festivals are allowed, are open for foreigners to visit. So we are actually very open and very welcoming foreigners and visitors from other Southeast Asian countries from across the world to enjoy Bruneian culture during New Year. Please come to Brunei.
Indeed, indeed, we will. And Doctor, advance
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you. Okay.
All right.
um, let's have this conversation continued to Indonesia. Ibu Lita, kita masih menanti soalan untuk Ibu. Ada satu yang baru masuk ini. Okay, let's have a question for Madam Lita. Okay. How should the government empower the Tengger people to strive for sustainable cultural tourism?
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry. Is my voice clear there? Hello?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So how is the government empower Tengger people? According to our law, exactly what already present before. So the community participant is one of the essential requirement. Therefore, we have like already mentioned maybe in my presentation, there is 4 strategy that we have to do for them, and one of them is empowerment through the human development. I mean the human empowerment. So we do some like it's not only some like research, but also like training for them, especially for make the ability to improve their ability in like their own craft, like handicraft or their like their sometimes they made with their own culture. So we do some like training for them, especially for women, for mom, for mother, because they are the foundation of the family. So and usually they made for the handicraft in cultural area. Therefore, one of we are doing using the empowerment, especially for the woman empowerment, through the trainings. Thank you.
Wow, amazing. That is really remarkable. In the
Yes.
next question, I would like to have the three of you try to give us your perspectives. So the question is, how are you and your communities in your country partnering with the private sector? Earlier on this morning, we had a conversation, academic conversation, philosophical conversation with an NGO that is also part of private sector. And one of the very nice and remarkable points was there must be a point of sale in order to have to create a viable market for travelers, tourists to come to visit your communities. Can you tell us, how are you partnering with your country's private sector, especially the tourism or travel agencies there? Let's begin with Brunei.
All right, thank you for the interesting questions. I guess here the local committee members who are, like providing their space for tourism industry are also working and engaging the private sectors, and I think this kind of, co-working type is aligned with our previous speaker when the private sector is the one who is also bridging our cultural potentials to our wider uh, visitors or prospectors, tourists, for example, and they know the networks that they have to invite to Brunei, for example. So I think the community and also the private sectors are playing very critical roles, and they have already been sharing their roles in terms of the managing tourism. And for example, here in Brunei, basically the local community members and also the private sectors are setting up boundaries. That's number one, about the roles and also the responsibility that they are doing in the tourism industry. And then number two is that they have been establishing what I call as a common understanding, what we should promote to the tourists or to the visitors. Is it our culture? Is it our religious, for example, our religious practices? Because for some foreigners coming from Europe or United States and also other Asian countries, learning about Islam is something new for them, right? For example, here I'm a Muslim in Beppu, Oita. I've lived here for 2 years, since 20 years ago, and I did uh, my religious practices like salat and so on every day in my Japanese school. And for them, this is kind of a uniqueness that actually I really want to uh, tell them that this is my identity. And then number three is that in terms of the profit sharing, is that the private sectors and also the community members should set up like a clear contract and also agreements to prevent the management from, like, like monetary fraud or kind of and then number four is about the sanctions. What would happen if one of the parties is not like in compliance with the agreements or the rules that they have already set up? Of course, the sanction is not necessarily settled by the court, but it is settled by negotiations. By in Sabah, we call it as a musyawarah mufakat, right? And also involving the mediator from the government, for example, and also from the local community members. And yeah, so we make the conflict resolutions more amicable, more friendlier, but also oriented to the problem solutions rather than escalating a new conflict. So that's what I've learned from the local community here in Brunei.
Wow, that is amazing.
Hmm.
How about the Philippines, Michael? How are you and your communities in tourism, cultural tourism, made advances with the private sector? Tell us about your experiences.
Yeah, actually, the Philippines has the first P is private partnership. So this is a very good way in promoting the connection between the government and private sector. And actually, for the tourism sector, I believe that culture is one of the backbone why tourism industry, because people visit the place sometimes not just because of the nature, because of tourism, but because of the culture of the people that we are showcasing. And like, for example, the National Commission for Culture and the Arts visiting many places around the Philippines to determine what are the sustainability programs that they want to implement. And because this NCCA is a government agency that is that provides funds for the indigenous people across the Philippines. And secondly, we also have this cultural center of the Philippines promoting our arts culture, not just in the Philippines, but abroad. And the third one, this government agency, the Department of Tourism, which is a very notable agency that could provide also how the community people promote the sustainability program when it comes to promoting culture, promoting the community-based tourism, which we learn sometimes in the IMTIAGA. And the third one is this tourism promotions board. Just recently, before they could give project for the private entities or private organization, they have to have this research on what are the things that this private institution is needed. Like example, industry, how could they help the weavers? How could they help the broadcasters? How could they help many of the artisans? It doesn't mean that they need to give something just for free, but also to make them sustainable in everything that we do. And I think that's a very best piece in the Philippines, the public and private partnership program. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And how about your experience in Indonesia, Ibu Lita? We're talking about cultural tourism and partnership with private sector. What's the outlook in Indonesia?
Okay, thank you. So as we know that the tourism itself need to be promoted thoroughly with private sector. It's not private. It's not only private company but also private institution. There is non-government organization also work with the with government. Exactly, we are together. We are making like corporate agreement to promote tourism and culture itself. So for examples, like we have in maybe in Borneo we have Sungai Utik, also the same like in from Iban community, right? So they have like their own travel agents, like they have like a private institution, and we work together. They bring Malaysian people to come to Indonesia. Also, they bring Indonesian people come to Malaysia. Also, I've been stayed in Rumah Betang and experienced by myself how they welcome for the tourists, and they live in their I mean like in their custom or their adat house. So we can live like people is like they self like and that's a very great experience, I think, like for tourism, for introducing our culture to others. And beside that, we also have like a corporate agreement with private sector. As we know, like in Borobudur Temple or in Prambanan Temple, it was like in there is they separate between three zones. So in one zone, it's a responsibility from the government to protect it, to preserve it. But on the other hand, when we have to promote it, so we use private company and we call it TWC, TWC. And then they try to promote it. They got the income from the tourists. So that how we try to collaborate between private sector, private company, private institution with the government. Thank you.
You know, the thought of how wonderful Indonesia, Philippines, and Brunei have this relationship with corporate governance in a mechanism. Two of you brought up sort of a kind of like an agreement, or what we can know as a compact, and understanding on how the roles of the community tourism model works together with the private sector business model. But let's come back to maybe one very interesting thing that we discussed this morning: authenticity and the modern market, where in modern tourism, it's about material culture. One of our speakers this morning mentioned that there are developments in our region in the name of authentic cultural tourism, but there is a satellite dish which is very glaring, and just beside the road there's a big bungalow being built. So can you tell us and share with us lessons learned in your country on how you see what is authentic and what is not authentic, leading towards a conversation to build a new model, sustainable, green, ecological, diverse, cultural, uniting in our context of mountain relations and peoples. Let's talk about that. Let's begin with Brunei first. What are your thoughts about authentic and non-authentic in this cultural tourism? I think we want to start something new in Bimpiaga with this, you know? Okay, over to you, Doctor.
All right. So I'm speaking as a research scholar. All right. And so I guess your question is too ambitious, to be honest. Yeah, because um, there is nothing, there is nothing sustainable in this world. Yeah. But we are always having a space, opportunity, efforts, and also policy to make everything sustainable. So near sustainable would be the concept I would be proposing in this international forum, but there is no, like sustainable development. The What we can do is to manage the development to be more sustainable. All right, so that's the point. And then when it comes to the authenticity, I guess right now we cannot prevent the globalizations of the capital influx or the capital flows from other countries to come in, and also we cannot prevent the capital flow from our country to go out to other countries. And number two is that the globalization is also shaped by the migrations of people, the mobility of, for example, the visitors, or for the international tourists to our country in Brunei. And that's also key components of the globalization, which also shaping the capital flows internationally. So these two things, for example, are also developing what I call as the hybrid identity of the culture itself, which is co-developing the authenticity itself. But the authentic form of the culture is never been, lost. It's always there, but at the same time we can see the product of the globalization, such as the new buildings, the new bungalow is established in front of the local community houses, for example, as mentioned by the speakers. So I guess this is what I call as acculturations. All right, in the context of the acculturations, the original the original culture the original cultural entities are always there, but in the same time, in the same vein, in the same context of modernity, we can also see the new products of the globalization, such as the building, the cafe, for example. The new shopping malls are also established, you know, next to the local community houses, for example. And this is what I call as a hybrid identity of culture. So we can see our authentic culture, but also the globalization product is also existing over there. The second example here in Japan, yeah, 5 meters away from the Starbucks restaurant is a Japanese traditional Shinto shrines. And then I interviewed one of the monks in the shrines, that this temple was established around one 1,500 years ago. All right, and then every single components of the shrines that was provided by the landlord many thousand years ago are still observable in this temple. All right, and then some people are still visiting this temple, and the Starbucks is the symbol, or the representations of the modernity. But from there, I can see that the modernity as also part of the globalizations, and the temple as the representations of the authentic Japanese culture are living harmoniously. They are not disrupting one another. So this is the thing that I really want to uh, highlight in this presentation.
Thank you for highlighting that. That helps us understand. It's 2022 coming to the new year of
Yeah,
2023, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
this conversation is
True.
is is very very fluid. I remember last year in our first international webinar, our professor from Korea was mentioning almost the same thing, but more on the behavior of the popular culture of South Korea.
Yeah, that's other
While there
things.
is still an authentic traditional values up on the mountains with the shrines, and that relates so much to your experience there in Japan. We didn't know that you were there, Doctor. But let's come back to Philippines in the context of authentic and modern. What are the challenge in the conversation that we have today, Michael? Do you have any idea or any experience, or whether this has actually come about in your experiences there as a tourism champion? Michael, over to you.
Yeah, once again, good afternoon. As a cultural worker, I think with this School of Living tradition, we really need to pass on to the young generation what is cultural about. And I think with the experience we had, like for example, this so-called authenticity, we cannot go back to 100 years ago just to look back on the culture. But I think in traditional manner, we could also what we call that we can also do that as of today, like for example the color, the way that we do the rituals, the way that we do the dancing, the way that we do the instruments. And speaking of sustainability, the young generation of today, we cannot also escape from globalization. Like for example, they prefer, that's the very challenge, they prefer to go to the disco, rather than sometimes staying at the SLT house. And that's the very challenge, especially in the Taboli community. But for as long as the cultural Taboli cultural workers are there, because this is our culture, we cannot stop doing what is best for our community. And I think that make us because the connection is going around and going around. For like this globalization, we cannot just say no to globalization. Like for example, if we want to promote our culture, we have to use the internet. If we want to promote the School of Living tradition so other people appreciate it, so the young generation would have appreciation towards it, we need to use Facebook, we need to use social media, and that's globalization. For our culture to be known to the world, we have to be globalized when it comes to our mind, of course. And one thing that we need to face the challenge this generation is this cultural misappropriation. Because when we give too much, yeah, sometimes there's also this inappropriation of the attire, inappropriation of the dances. It's not appropriate we believe in, what we act into. And at the end of the day, actually, that is why the School of Living tradition is very important in the Tiboli community. So that the tradition of dancing, the tradition of chanting, the tradition of playing instrument will still be alive, even in modernity. So I think that's for me. And for this generation, we need to fit in ourselves to globalization because we cannot control globalization. So for as long as we appreciate the culture, we love the culture, we have to keep the fire burning in us when it comes to our passion. The culture is still alive within us. Thank you.
Wow, spoken like a true champion. Thank you, Michael. Let's get the perspective of Lita. Okay, so it's the conversation is authentic, modern. What are the challenges in Indonesia today on this particular cultural tourism and rural community empowerment?
Okay, thank you very much. I quite agree with the two speakers before that we need to protect the authentic it's true, but we cannot leave the globalization itself. So, but what I learned from the Tengger people that they during the pandemic we can see that they can accept for tourism. So and most of them live from the tourism. So when the tourists come again to their area, so they try they promote again their culture. So the culture it's not become, I mean, like the authentic of the culture itself, it's become, I mean, like it can be preserved by itself, by their own community, by the showing, by showing them to the tourists. So I mean, like the authentic itself, I know we have to protect it, but we cannot leave the globalization. We need to live exactly, right? So we have to I mean, like but beside they show it, so exactly in the same way they try to protect the authentic itself. For some culture that maybe that they cannot show to the peoples directly, like in rituals, ritual show, something like that. For example, in Bali itself, they have like maybe most of you already know about tali kecak. So they try to make two of them, two type of dance. So one of dance that they can show to the people, but one of the dance that's only for the ritual itself, so they cannot show. But it's also, I mean, like it depends to the how we call it in like tutua adat, something like they respect old people that people respect, so they will ask for them which one is the authentic that we have to preserve, that we have to protect, and which one of the culture that we can show to the people, for the tourists, for I mean, like also to show our culture. So I mean, like yeah, I mean, I know we know that we have to show the authentic of our culture, but also we cannot leave the globalization itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lita. I think it's very clear already. We can't leave globalization just like that. We can't leave our cultures, our knowledges just like that. So there has to be some way forward. We are living in the Bimpiaga region. And coming to you from Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, Malaysia, Sabah Cultural Board is the Malaysian focal point for this particular pillar. And that point just makes me segue into an interesting question from Muhammad Yui Go. Now let's contextualize this as country members of BIMPIAGA. Let's see if we can find a common idea to push this conversation forward. If we could have it built into the third annual Mountain People Relation, or perhaps the next year we could have something physical. How about that? There's no more COVID. We are looking forward a determined development among our countries. Private sector is ready to engage with us. But let's come back to this question, and I pose this to each of you. As a member of BIMPIAGA, what is your opinion about collaboration between our countries in empowering rural communities, especially when it comes to related to cultures? What could be done within the countries? Any suggestions? Let's start with Dr. Meridian in Japan right now.
All right. I guess the takeaway message is that that kind of the collaborative workshops is really, really doable, and I would like to, I would like to join if this event will be conducted by the Sabah Cultural Board. I guess yeah, this is something that really appreciated from my viewpoints, because this kind of event is rarely conducted in the past, but I think we need this kind of like international sharing, how the different countries such as Indonesia, Brunei Darussalam, as well as the Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore have been managing their like cultural tourism, incorporating the eco-tourism in the mountainous region, for example. And I guess so this is a good lesson learned, and also something that can be implemented in those countries. So I guess we would like to learn 8 points. Number one is about the setting boundaries of the stakeholders and resource. and how they manage this thing. And number two is about I would like to learn more about the how the benefits and costs are managed. Number three, about how the stakeholders, particularly the community members, um, use the certain traditional procedures for making their own rules along the local stakeholders. Number four is about how the stakeholders in the different countries have set up what I call as a regular monitorings of the engagement among the users and how they govern the resource conditions. The resource condition here refer to the natural resources and the non-natural resources, such as in Kundasang in Sabah, they got a plenty of the water resources, biodiversity, cool climates, friendly people. Hopefully, I can go to the Kundasang next summer. And number five is the graduated sanctions. The graduated sanction here refer to not only penalties or the sanction that we can implement, but also different type of the social reconciliations, how the problems can be solved amicably through the local traditions. Like for example, in Malaysia, you got the musyawarah, right? And musyawarah for mufakat, which is also implemented here in a Bruneian society. And then number six is about the graduated sanctions and how the problems can be solved will be leading to a better conflict resolution mechanism. And then number seven is on the recognitions of the rights by the government. In my presentations, I don't see the community should be empowered, but I see the community should empower the governments and also other stakeholders involved in the ecotourism in the nature regions, such as the business sectors, the governments, and also, for example, the institutional educations. Um, it was mentioned by our Philippines colleagues that the schools are also playing critical roles in promoting the ecotourism and also the nature-based tourism in the country, right? So I think this is the thing. This is some items that I really would like to learn from you guys if this kind of international workshop would be conducted. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion, Dr. Meridian. A
Yep.
workshop, maybe for next year. Let's ask the same question and we frame it in the context of the Philippines. Michael Yambok, what can be collaborations within country and within Bimpiaga, our countries together?
Yeah. Suggestion that I have in mind is for us to have exchange and workshop. So I have three things that I have in mind for this collaboration in the near future. Like for example, because I believe that it's by Piaga and other Southeast Asian countries, we have beautiful culture and we have beautiful people. So we need to expose ourselves to communities where we can also share commonalities, and we have also to bridge uh, our sense of people like that. And second is also adventure, because we are also promoting tourism and we also need to engage with the activities of other countries. Like when you go to the Philippines, you need to have zip line. When we go to Malaysia, and we also try your tourism country. And the other thing is also to expose to the nature, and because I believe we have different things to be proud of when it comes to our nature, the lakes, the falls, the rivers, and many other things, and we are very rich about that. So by that, I hope in the near future we could have this conversation through cultural exchange and workshops so that we can talk on many things that we can do for the BIM Piaga, and we can collaborate it or we can propose it to the government. Thank you.
Cultural exchanges, fantastic idea, Michael. How about your idea, Lita, from Indonesia?
Okay, thank you. Uh, in my opinion, there is no boundaries in cultures. So what makes it's there is different between Indonesia and Malaysia? It's only administration, right? So I think that's really a great idea. If we can mix together, I mean, like all the culture product itself or the practice nowadays, it's like a mix or a combination of many culture or community. My stay when I stayed in Iban community in Kalimantan in Borneo, I learned something that exactly we are the same. We have the same culture. We have the same not really identity. We have the same roots. I mean, like that. So why not? We try to make something like sharing knowledge through the maybe through like the training for the human empowerment. Like we have to try to make some like I said before, like private institution from Malaysia and from Indonesia, especially in Borneo. I know because I've been there. So, but in also in Philippines, we have like similar with Manado from the southern part of Indonesia, from the southern Sulawesi syllabus of Indonesia. So I think we have many things that we can try to combine, try to discuss, and then we can do together to make the tourism and the culture itself become more advanced and become more acceptable for everybody, especially between BIMP countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lita. For the three of you, let me just come back to the reality of time. It's at 2:50 Malaysia time. It could be a different time in your time zone, but we still have a lot of time because in this afternoon session, we only finish at 3:30. So that gives us a little bit more extra time to have the continued conversation. I would first like to ask our studio audience if you have any question for our international panelists. You can either step forward to be seen here by the camera, or you can jump in our conversation online in Facebook and send those questions over to us. If you allow me to continue the conversation, I'm looking now at our Bimpiaga tourism pillar sector. There is a strategy under Vision 2025. We've had 2 years of the pandemic, and we haven't actually recovered. In the recent conversation in the Malaysian context, the economy hasn't revived post COVID, and one senior analyst mentioned that we have not seen any growth at all after the pandemic. Let's have a conversation about our national ideas or strategy. Let's just say an open brainstorm. What would you be able to do from your country to speak to national government regarding this idea of mountain peoples and mountain relations with peoples in the context of cultural tourism and empowerment? What would you recommend to your countries? Let's begin with Dr. Meridian Alam for Brunei.
All right, thank you for the questions. So I guess there are several methods or several sort of ways to convey this takeaway message to the government, and I would like to mention there are actually four transformational frames that I can present to not only government but also to the other stakeholders such as the private sectors and also the community leaders, community members, and also the educational institutions. Like right now here in UBD and in University of Brunei Darussalam at the Faculty of Art and Social Science, we are also having a very special program. It's called the tourism program under the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies. And then in this department, we are also focusing on the ecotourism or nature-based tourism (NBT) in Brunei Darussalam, because Brunei has a lot of jungle, pristine forest, jungles, rivers, and also the local communities are also still living and living there and conserving their traditions. And the thing that I would like to frame in this kind of what kind of transformation that we would like to have. I'm actually very interested to respond to the like the cultural exchange, and whether the cultural exchange output can be implemented in Brunei or elsewhere. But please be mindful that we cannot implement the things that we learn instantly or immediately. So we have to look back on what the potential resources and also the cultural entities and tradition that we have, because the output of the exchange, the output of the cultural exchange is not necessarily implementable in other countries. It means that we have to make the output of the workshop more suitable and palatable for the local community members, for the government, for the private sectors, and so on. And I completely disagree that we have to set up like a list of similarities table or the differences tables, because even the IBAN community in Indonesia is claimed to be the same as the IBAN community Malaysia. And if the Professor Lita said that they have a cultural roots, but actually they are having so much differences. I don't want to tell you about these differences because this is anthropological research. It takes like 7 days to examine this research. But what I want to highlight that actually, in terms of the cultural transformations, the first frame that we need to understand that the similarities and also the differences are also in the form of the behavioral. For example, the attitude of the community members, and also the way they are practicing their traditions, and also how they are implementing sanctions and rules in their community members, and how they are governing their nature. For example, the Iban community here in Brunei is more traditional than the Dayak community in Indonesia, where right now the Indonesia will be relocating their capital city in Kalimantan, right? So then they are impacted by the pre-development progress in Kalimantan, and some of them were also quite affected by the mobility of the transmigrant from other provinces. I do really know about it. And also, instead of the behavioral, we should also take note of the social and cultural transformations, which is, in, which is, for example, the practices that are not that were not existing in the past, and now these practices are also modified and innovated, and then how the globalizations, the capital flow, human mobility are also shaping the social and cultural transformations. And then number three is on the tangible, the tangible forms of the transformations. The tangible here refer to the artifacts, the buildings, the houses. Like for example, you said that in some of the traditional community in Sabah, they are still preserving their rumah panggung, but in some of other community members, they are more preferring to having like cemented houses. And why this kind of tangible cultural products can coexist in our new Malaysian modernity? So we have to look at it much more closer and in a more wise and scholarly analysis, rather than analyzing the similarity and differences. So analyzing the similarity and differences amongst the traditional community is not wise, I would say, because every single traditional communities, the native communities elsewhere, not only in Indonesia, Malaysia, or in Thailand, or in, in Singapore, across the world, uh, they are requiring us to appreciate them. That's one point I want to highlight. And then number two, um, they want us uh, to treat them as their collaborative partners, as their co-workers in the development. So again and again, as an anthropologist and a sociologist, I would rather say that they have a rich cultural potentials, cultural entities, practices, religious and spiritual potentials that we need to learn from them, and we should uh, position them as a trainer or as a workshop teacher in our tourism exchange rather than as a participant. You know. So my background is a sociologist and sociology and anthropology, where the community voice um, instead of to be heard, but their voices are um, are to be incorporated, and we need their voices, their actions, their stories, their advice to be constantly implemented in our natural tourism policy. That's really a great points if we can do so. But yeah, and I don't think this is a challenge, but this is an opportunity.
Indeed, Doctor, it's an opportunity. There is a potential way forward, and each of our countries have committed to this international framework. I think we need to have concrete meetings, and finally, let me turn off my phone. Sorry, excuse me. What I was saying is, we have to have concrete conversations between our government leaders. Thank you for your exceptional recommendation. At the end, it's still policy development and inclusiveness of the communities that are going to be involved in this empowerment and um, cultural tourism, especially for this mountain territories and places and people in our region. I totally agree with you. What are your thoughts about this topic, Michael? How are you going to engage NCCA or the Philippines national government in terms of yourself as a tourism and a community or cultural worker, a champion, to lobby to national government for our governments to come together and really bring development where it is really necessary and detrimental to our communities of the mountain. What are your thoughts, Michael?
Yeah, being in the rural communities, actually in Lake Cebu, during the time of pandemic in 2 years ago, I didn't find that the government has left us, because during that time, we also received financial assistance from the government, including those cultural masters, tourism advocates who has lost their job. But I think it's not that about that, because we are not prepared during 2020 pandemic. But what I am trying to propose in the government, especially with the local government unit, is to set priority on culture and arts and tourism by allocating funds to cultural activities, to what they call that, to our cultural masters and many of the activities. But by some local government who had spent much financial resources to this. And secondly, there should be a law like this for misappropriation of the cultural materials of the indigenous people. And I think for now we are still lobbying that, and hopefully in the near future it has to be passed into law, so that there will be sanction to those who have used the cultural materials of the indigenous people misappropriately. And the third one is we need to have a Department of Culture, so that all cultural activities in the Philippines uh, should be under one department, at least in partnership with the Department of Tourism and with other tourism national line agency in the Philippines. And I think the Philippine government is also doing its best to capture the culture and the tourism industry. That is the reason why many of the programs now gradually they are pushing some programs for mental health. They are pushing programs for our tourism industry, and they are also pushing programs for cultural development, like the NCCA is doing, the Cultural Center of the Philippines is doing now. They are going in different areas of the Philippines, and also the Department of Tourism. They are also doing their own job because gradually uh, we may feel the presence of this government agency so that we as people, mountain people, not feel that we are left behind. And I think that's the best about the Philippine government. Though it's not perfect, but the Philippine government is trying its best to give its people what they deserve. Thank you.
How about you, Prof. Lita?
Oh, okay. I think there's something with my uh, networking. But uh, first of all, I would like to say thank you for the input for the Professor Mary Tian, right? About that. Yeah, we will take a long time. We have to we have to read again about the research about the similarity and differences between Iban community itself. So, but according to the question that because I'm from the government itself, so I cannot directly propose what the government should do. But what I would like to explain here what Indonesian already did to advance our culture. Like we have a formulating the culture white paper that it's become from the district or municipal uh, municip municipality culture and then they bring it to the province, and from the province they bring it again to the national, and then we have like the master plan for the advancement of culture. That where what we try to do, like we tried we made it from the bottom and to the top. So, and also what we already, yeah, we try to do, it's like make the improving in education and training in the field of culture itself, and also the standardization about and the certification about the actors or the workers in the field of the culture, so they can compete in the outside of Indonesia. And uh, and lastly, that we try to do, it's like dissemination through like the cultural exchange, through the exhibition, through the festival. So our people can bring their culture, can show their culture to outside of Indonesia, also inside the Indonesia itself. So um, we try to do like the from the law that we have like a 4 strategic action that we try to do. From the protection, we try to develop it, and we try to utilize it through the festival, through the exhibition, and also try to empowerment with what I said before, through the standardization, through the empowering, like improving education, and also maybe improving the community well-beings. That's right. That's what we try to do for the community, especially who for them who preserve the culture, their own culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lita from Indonesia. You've spoken, the three of you have spoken and have taught all of us watching online the values, shared values, the commonalities, the challenges, the good practices, and even some secret sauce and mechanization on how to make wonderful stories and create champions. Here in Sabah, we have been trying very best, and we continue to do our very best to create community champions. as expressed and explained by our previous speakers from academia, from the private sector, and from the cultural board, there is really a need to find ways to integrate and come together with our colleagues from throughout the whole of Bimpiaga. Let's not forget that Bimpiaga has also members in Northern Australia, and it also has the private sector group. Perhaps in the future, we can also have more in-depth conversations about the way forward, knowing that the Bimpiaga tourism pillar, by 2025, it should have already achieved its mission, vision, and goals. We've come to the end of this second international webinar on people and the mountain relations. And this year, our topic, our theme is cultural tourism and rural community empowerment. On behalf of the state government of Sabah and Sabah Cultural Board, we want to thank once again our international speakers from Brunei Darussalam, Dr. Meridian Alam. Terima kasih. From the Philippines, Michael Angelo Langgong Yambok, thank you, mabuhay. And from Indonesia, Prof. Lita Ramiati, terima kasih banyak-banyak Ibu for joining us this year. We hope next year we can finally meet each other, perhaps in the field or in a festival, and together let's work towards this goal because it is also shared with all of us. Thank you very much for those of you who have been watching us from 9 a.m. this morning. There are still so many of you live. Yeah, just continue to get in this very, very good vibe. I really believe and very, very much encouraged by all your loves, your thumbs ups, and then your hugs. We got 75. This morning we got about 100 over. But nevertheless, this content is here to stay. It's going to be permanently on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, and on TV Sabah. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, we would like to invite Yang Berbahagia, Datuk Haji Esar Muhammad Yusri Abdullah, the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah, to provide the summary of our webinar. This will be followed by a closing video and credit appreciation. Thank you so much for joining us and see you again next year. Atama Katama saying bye-bye for now.
Sabah Maju Jaya. First and foremost, I would like to express my appreciation to the speakers and panelists for their valuable contribution to our second People and the Mountain Relation webinar with the theme of Cultural Tourism and Rural Community Empowerment. My deepest gratitude goes to all who attended the webinar, whether physically or through online streaming, and helped to make it such a successful event. Not to forget, to the organizer, Sabah Cultural Board, congratulations for your hard effort in organizing this webinar. During the morning session, today we have been presented with a few interesting topics from the Malaysian panelists. First topic was from Mr. Albert Teo, related to rural community empowerment and 5 community projects implemented by Borneo Eco Tours or Sukau Rainforest Lodge under the non-government organization, which is the Best Society. The second topic was from Dr. James Lungkapis, regarding the study of cultural tourism and community empowerment. The case study is about the Estate-Based Community Development, or ABCD, approach to develop 3 rural cultural tourism destinations and how it's managed to empower local community and demonstrate a more sustainable rural livelihood outcome. The third topic was presented by Dr. Paul Porodong. The presentation is about how humans express their relation and interaction with the physical nature by developing very elaborate cultural and spiritual meaning, and even build a man-made structure to explain some aspect of their lives. And the last topic for the morning session was from Dr. Victor Luna Amin about the sacred Gunung Lesong, Sarawak, its spiritual significance and community-based tourism. Based on the topic presented, we realized that our culture in the past affect our traditional belief and way of life. Nowadays, it can be seen as one of our cultural heritage that can be used developing our cultural tourism while preserving and conserving it. Cultural tourism research is one of the methods that can be used in finding ways to utilize our cultural heritage so it can benefit the community in increasing their household income. Assistance from the government and non-governmental organizations in educating the community to fully utilize the culture in improving the standard of living is crucial to ensure that the empowerment from the grassroots level and can be implemented. On the evening session, we were presented with the 3 presentations from our neighboring country, that is from Brunei, Indonesia, and Philippines. The first presentation was from Dr. Meridian Alam, our panel from Brunei Darussalam. His presentation was about mountainous region, conservation from the sociological perspective. And we have Mr. Michael Angelo Yambo as our second presenter in the evening session. His presentation was about the School of Living Tradition, or SLT, as a flagship project of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, NCCA, initiated by the Sub-Commission on the Cultural Community and the Traditional Art in Philippines. Our last presenter was Ibu Lita Rahmiati with the title of Tradition, Tourism, and Culture Empowerment. Lesson learned from the Tenja community in Mount Bromo, Indonesia. We are very lucky to have this international presenter with us today because we can learn about the perspective of cultural tourism and community empowerment in other countries. Different perspectives could give us different view on how to preserve and conserve our culture, and at the same time, we can share our side of the story to other regions. Based on this, I believe that in the future, we could think of ways to collaborate further as BIM IAGA members country to empower culture, tourism, and our community. Last but not least, once again, I would like to congratulate to all the wonderful people who has been with us throughout this webinar since the morning session. I hope the webinar benefits all of us. Have a good day. God bless. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And thank you.
Greetings and Kopi Vosian. I'm Jeremiah Richard Lim, representing the districts of Membakut for Mr. Keamatan 2022. As you can see now, I'm riding on a horse while wearing a colorful and decorative outfits here in Kampung Sasai, Kota Belud. There's more and wonderful activities here in our own backyard. So let's grab this opportunity and explore Sabah. Kadada Vago!
Hello, I am Erin Richard, a participant of Mr. Keamatan from the district of Putatan for the year 2022. As you can see, I am riding a decorated horse to promote cultural tourism here in Kota Belud. Let's enjoy this moment and gain some experience. So, come on!
Salam sejahtera and Kopi Vosian. My name is Joe Jeprin from Dewan Bandaraya Kota Kinabalu. And as you can see right now, I'm riding this beautiful decorated horse in order to promote the beautiful cultural tourism here in Kota Belud. Come and join us. Amantap Kopizo!